and why we need to dismantle patriarchy. And this sermon comes straightway from my heart, a heart full of honesty and humility and hopefulness. We must keep coming back to this task all the way to our graves. Because dismantling patriarchy isn't an ad hoc cause. So it's not a task force. It's a lifelong commitment, and we're far, far, far from finished. When the Me Too movement recedes as a moral prod, and it will, we men must keep on keeping on, mustering the same kind of passion for combating patriarchy that we regularly muster for sports and cars and escapades and professional achievement and romance and whatever else captures our loyalties. In battling patriarchy, we will be exhibiting testosterone with heart. But I harbor no illusions. In dismantling a tradition as entrenched as patriarchy, we will endure falling statuary, as well as suffer immense pushback from both genders, all genders. Our progressive UU movement is well known and should be for tackling always the thorniest and the most relevant of social and moral causes such as immigration justice and white supremacy and prison reform, and global warming and gun control and gender fluidity issues. And we must never stop doing so. But while confronting hot button challenges, we dare not forget that the perennial, most intractable culprit, patriarchy, cannot be ignored or swept aside. It's as if our religion sometimes implies that we've reached the promised land with regard to gender justice. I mean, after all, we've passed the necessary resolutions, haven't we? After all, we have more female than male ministers in seminary now, and when I'm underground in our pulpits. After all, women have made measurable gains in the workplace and in changing family roles. But the stark truth is that far too many women and girls the world over, as well as in our own country, continue to be discriminated against, subjected to violence, denied equal opportunities to education and employment, and excluded from positions of leadership and decision-making. Recently, a poll by the Pew Research Center found that 56% of men and 34% of women thought that sexism was no longer a barrier to women in this country. Of course, over the last 50 years or so, overt sexism, like overt racism, has been less socially acceptable. But sexism is not dead. It's alive and kicking. It's sneakier and more pernicious than ever. We do not inhabit a post-sexist America, and current public rhetoric and behavior have had an effect of mainstreaming misogyny, just as it has mainstreamed anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim sentiment. And it's not just men getting in on the act. Women also buy into internalized sexism. Sisters, I invite you to regulate your own social and moral behavior, your own issues of appearance and boundaries and accountability. But that's not my homework assignment. That's not my task and never will be. My job is to focus upon what my chosen gender has perpetrated due to patriarchy. And believe me, patriarchy produces devastating results for us males too. Emotionally constipated boys, suicidal teenagers, depressed adults unwilling to recognize or deal with the depression. burgeoning violence within and against self and others. The carnage goes on and on. And so the radical truth is that in dismantling patriarchy, we will be dismantling the multiple crises from which we males gravely suffer. Patriarchy is a major human obstacle. And when boldly addressed, everybody wins. Everybody is freed. Women, children, plants, animals, men, and believe me, any and all deities will be duly rejoicing. Sure, it's positive news that there will soon be a National Women's Museum affiliated with the Smithsonian and centered exclusively on the history of women in the United States. But we need more than the erection of a few statues or museums or the crushing of a bronze ceiling here and there. The ultimate goal is having women and men considered of equal human value and importance in our world, in our country, in our congregations, in our homes, and in our hearts. When his 19th century Unitarian foresister, Margaret Fuller, she wrote this incredible piece in her hymnal in 1840. And as you know, she died tragically in a shipwreck at the age of 40 years of age. Man and woman may regard one another as brother and sister, able both to appreciate and to prophesy to one another. Appreciate as well as prophesy to one another. And so we must not only confront the outed males, such as Donald Trump and John Conyers, Matt Lauer and Harvey Weinstein, Rob Porter and Bill Cosby. Our male culture is riddled with patriarchy, not merely a few bad apples. This morning I'm addressing every male in our land. I'm speaking to every man in this gathered congregation. I'm speaking to myself. For I was, during my first 2 years of parish ministry, a male who acted inappropriately with women. I'm guilty and ashamed of my behavior. I was an active part of a Unitarian Universalist ministerial culture that was misogynist and abusive. The last 45 years since Carolyn and I yoked journeys, I've intentionally made my life a dogged, yet persistent, and truly imperfect effort to build bridges of gender respect, purposefully dismantling the very patriarchy of which I have been a beneficiary and a stakeholder. And I know that adequate reparations are impossible. I know that reconciliation will never be fully realized during my lifetime. But I also know that I will not let up. And I will not turn back till I've gone to my grave. We all know that women have been bravely and boldly joining the Me Too movement with regard to sexual harassment and violation. Some abused men have rightly signed on too. But I'm asking today for the men in our UU congregations to build a Me Too movement wherein men sign on as violators, harassers, and perpetrators of any form of gender disrespect and malfeasance. Me too. Me too. Me too. And more than that, if we Unitarian Universalist brothers are willing to sign on as violators, in some sense, in some way, at some time, then we must also be ready and willing to sign on as reconcilers and repairers, allies and advocates in dismantling patriarchy. We must launch a Me Too movement for gender justice, That's the real work. That's the main men's work that we must sustain in every major exchange or minor encounter with each woman and each girl we meet day in and day out. It all starts with respect. When the men and women in our Building Bridges work at First Church were asked what constituted the most important principle for empowering healthy male-female alliances, both genders invariably described one version or another of respect. Give me respect, and we can build just about anything we want together. But without mutual respect, all the enthusiasm and the strategies, all the platitudes and love won't save us from intentionally or unintentionally harming one another. Respect, or what the Buddhists call right relationship, requires persistence and hard work. I want to hear what pains or scares you, that I might tell you in turn about my heart hurts and fears. What makes you happy? Then I might also speak of my joys. What you need from me in order to be a fully respected and dignified creation. And respectful men are unashamedly, unabashedly willing to be pro-feminist men. I often hear Unitarian Universalist male comrades saying, but I've got my own issues and bruises. Plus, I don't really have the energy or time to be political. And I hear you, and I offer two plain responses. First, I enduringly care about the plight of my Unitarian Universalist brothers. I've given a core of my ministry to it. And in fact, one of the best gifts a man can give himself is to be a part of a genuinely trustworthy men's support experience. Best gift to himself, to the women in his life, to the children, plants, animals, on and on. I applaud the process of men venting our own festering agonies and woes. You know why? Because wounded animals are the most dangerous. But being wounded is only part of our story. We men are also wounders, and we must answer for that. We need to heed the unbearable pain and terror that women and children feel in living in a world in which 1 in 4 women will be raped and 1 in 6 children is a victim of sexual abuse. As the saying goes, men are afraid of being laughed at, women are afraid of being killed. Secondly, we're incorrigibly social animals. So own your identity. Men can ill afford to smugly gaze at our navels without being social contributors. Mature masculinity, not toxic masculinity, mature masculinity requires that we heal both the body politic as well as the body personal. In the authentic religious life, the private and the public are interwoven. We are, as Brother Jocko Ten Ho says, we are both Andeans. As a man, I won't restore my humanity simply by reclaiming my emotions, or making peace with my father, or becoming more intimate with other men, all of which we need to do as men. The only way to fully restore our lost male humanity and heal the fractured earth is through working for justice benefiting more than just our white, heterosexual, able-bodied, privileged male selves. Working for a justice that will serve the disenfranchised entities, the least, and the last and the lost of our world. What our pro-feminist principle is saying is, men, we invite you to hear women's anxiety and rage without commenting. And don't be paralyzed by guilt. And don't whine or pummel yourselves. Don't defend or retaliate. Don't even take women's anger personally. Just listen. Just listen long and hard to their stories. And then choose every minute of every day to become a more respectful man. Starting at coffee hour today, going through the afternoon and into the evening, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. Patriarchy is the relentless foe of authentic gender justice. In fact, I'm willing to say that the various inequities that define our contemporary world, white supremacy and imperialism and gun violence and poverty and ageism and environmental degradation and speciesism, they're all based on the central feature of patriarchy, an attempt to make the domination-subordination dynamic appear to be the normal and hence inevitable feature of human societies. The recent gun violence tragedies, and when I started this sermon a while back, it was Parkland, which I wish to briefly address, and now it's Santa Fe, Texas, and then it will be, and then it will be. It exemplifies gun violence, exemplifies patriarchy, the domination-subordination dynamic at its worst. Another angry, deranged young adult white male willfully shoots up a school. Women suffer from mental illness too, my friends. But 98% of mass shootings in America are done by men. And the only way that this seemingly powerless male in Parkland and in Santa Fe could dominate was to retaliate, to use the biggest and baddest weapons available to dominate via destruction of human life. And to make matters worse, while our nation was initially grieving the Parkland, Florida tragedy, the House, you probably didn't see it, the House quietly passes a bill to gut Americans with Disabilities Act, adding shame to sorrow. Another example of the dominant, subordinate dynamic run amok. And on the other hand, some ways I've been an incurable romantic. I'm outgrowing that, but I'll never outgrow a sense of hopefulness. And on the other hand, look at the young women and men who are working nonstop to combat gun violence and the Never Again movement. And who was it that started the Black Matters, Lives Matter movement? Young women in their 20s and 30s for whom this is not a task force. This is a life cause. Lifers. And those young men and women in Parkland and Santa Fe will be lifers when we're underground. We can turn the world over to them. But we still got to do our work while we're above ground. Patriarchy pure and simple worships and promotes gender domination, be it harassment, rape, sexual assault, or the attack on women's health by removing basic coverage, cutting maternity care, or sharply limiting reproductive rights. Brothers, listen in. I'm not interested in blaming or shaming my own gender. I don't have the time or interest or moral commitment to that. To spend an ounce of my energy to shame or blame anybody. All I'm doing is calling us to accountability. Calling us to accountability for the remaining years we have on this earth. Men made patriarchy possible. That does not mean patriarchy is immutable. In the 200,000 years of the species Homo sapiens, patriarchy accounts for less than 5% of our evolutionary history. There was a pre-patriarchal period in human history. There can be a post-patriarchal one too, but it will take the bravest and the boldest work we men have ever been about. I hear some brothers saying, but Tom, I'm essentially clean with regard to sexism, and so you're probably not talking about me. I say, good for you. Good for you, we need you. All you got to do is stay clean and clear all your remaining days and nights. But never forget you belong to a gender that isn't clear and clean. And you owe the rest of your brothers your best example and full support. The ultimate male power is to say no to violence, no to violation of person or property. Everything else is a bonus. I want to close with talking about a movement in which one of our UUs is very involved, a dear friend of mine, Jamie Edmonds, and our East San Diego congregation and Summit Fellowship. It's raising boys toward mature manhood. Perhaps you've heard about it. You see, in dismantling patriarchy, we men got to do a whole lot more than raise a ruckus or raise some hell here and there, or raise a protest. We need to raise the worth and dignity of our young. And in so doing, we will be raising the worth and dignity of the entire village. If you haven't noticed that our children, and maybe not in your family, and maybe not in your neighborhood, but you got to go beyond that and to know that there are young boys that are struggling. As the African proverb puts it, if our young are not initiated into the village, they will burn it down to feel the heat. Our young boys and teenagers are often unmotivated, underachieving, turning to bullying, drugs, violence, depression, gangs. But more than that, it's broader than, deeper than that. A recent survey of boys in the 8th grade revealed that 90% of them see their primary goal in life as what? Making lots of money. Making lots of money. We're better than that, aren't we? In over 1 million high schools, only 19% of the young men in those high schools feel valued by their society. And furthermore, every day 3 boys commit suicide. 3 boys commit suicide every day in this country, higher among GLBTQ kids. We've got to do better by our youth. It's not just that teens have gone bad in today's world. No. The grievous fault lies with us adult males. Females, you join in on your own way, but you know I'm speaking to the adult males. We need to provide our young with ceremonial markings for deeper and safer and richer transition into young adulthood. Better than a first drink or a first sexual encounter or garnering a driver's license or even voting. We need to help our adolescent boys know that with every privilege there is a corresponding responsibility. Our youth covet, are hungry for meaningful heart-to-heart intergenerational exchanges such as those they receive in our resourceful Unitarian Universalist coming-of-age programs at our best. I'm not an optimist anymore. Been too much in my life personally and socially in my 77 years that I'm no longer an optimist. But I'm an incurable, hopeful person. I believe that racism and homophobia and classism and sexism are here to stay. But I will not throw in the towel. I am someone that is beginning to believe that my triumphs may be small, but one who remains fiercely loyal to the cause, knowing that upon occasion my talk and my walk will grow some corn. So my dearly beloved Unitarian Universalist brothers and sisters listening in, let us pursue progress, not perfection. Reforming and being reformed, ever achieving personal and public approximations, getting a tad closer toward gender justice. And let us aspire to recognize our privilege, confess our blunders, omissions, and abuse, and become respectful carriers of a revolutionary manifesto. And although we will fumble and falter along the path, let us never turn back from dismantling patriarchy. We're gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Your spirit and physical abilities allow, join me on the path. I'm on my way, 116.
Please rise and embody your spirit to sing I'm on my way. This is a call and response type song, so you can choose to join Susan, Liza, or Barbara in the call, or you can join Phil and me in the response.